Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on the DC animated feature adaptation of The Killing Joke. It was definitely, right out of the gate, for lack of a better term, interesting. And that is because, for those who may be unfamiliar, they've added for this feature film a sort of prologue and a kind of sort of end cap, a post-credits end cap that very much revolves around Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl / Oracle, and it's really raised some eyebrows and created some controversy, and it's not hard to see why. I'm not personally overly familiar with the history of Batgirl, and I've always actually been highly compelled by The Killing Joke, the graphic novel by Alan Moore and Brian Bolland. It's been something it's kind of been one of my favorite stories because of how it delves into the psychosis, the breaking of the mind of the Joker in one incarnation, in any case, of his, sort of evolution and his origin story. And I've always been largely compelled by it. I always thought the art was beautiful, and it was a very intriguing story. It's a very simplistic story. The Joker breaks out of Arkham Asylum. He basically goes to Commissioner Gordon's apartment, and Barbara is there, not donning, of course, her Batgirl guise. And I don't think the Joker is even aware that she is Batgirl at that point. But effectively, he pulls a gun and shoots her through the stomach, which paralyzes her. And for Batgirl fans, I mean, this is a story that apparently really raises the ire of Batgirl fans, and it's noted as being one of the lowest points of her 40-year history, whatever it is, something along those lines, as I've seen an article purport. And it's not hard to see why, but effectively, the Batman goes on the chase after Commissioner Gordon has been kidnapped by the Joker after he's done this to, Barbara. He's also stripped her naked and taken, unsavory photographs of her his whole point is to show that by having one bad day, even the most stalwart mind, even the most upstanding mind, in this case Commissioner Gordon's, it can be broken if pushed far enough. And this because, as we see through flashbacks, the Joker's own mind was broken in such a fashion. He was a stand-up comedian who was trying to make ends meet, just barely getting by for he and his, I'm not sure if it was his wife or his girlfriend, but she's pregnant, with child effectively, and he's just trying to make their lives better. And so he sidles up with a couple of gangsters because of his former job in a, chemical plant. They're going to rob it or whatever it is, and he's going to wear the Red Hood. They have this sort of mascot for their gang, which they kind of switch it out. They pick a patsy every time they're going to do a job, and there's a Red Hood on the scene. It's always somebody different, and now it's going to be the Joker in his former guise before he becomes the Joker, of course, to make some good money and start a better life for he and his girlfriend and their, yet to be born child. And he finds out shortly thereafter, when he's making the plans to make this money, that his girlfriend dies tragically in an accidental fire. And so you basically have him thinking, I can't go through with this. What's the point anymore? My life is over. And the gangsters strong-arm him into, keeping up with his promise. Enter Batman, who essentially alongside the police foils the attempted crime, and we see this comedian fall into the vat of chemicals that will assist in the breaking of his mind and create the bleached skin, red-lipped, green-haired Joker we all know, and well, some of us in any case are compelled by and love as a villain. He's my all-time favorite villain, I'll have to be honest, because he goes so far and away against any rationality, any sense-making. There are real-life, real-world human beings who will do similar things to other human beings, and it's something that, at least for myself as an empathic person, a compassionate person, a humanist, I just don't understand. I can't comprehend. And the Joker is the limit, the end-all, be-all of that equation, that psychosis, that psychotic nature. and just the color scheme, the look of his entire character in most incarnations looking like a clown, the clown prince of crime. It is something that has compelled me, and that's very much what we see in this DC animated feature, at least in the Killing Joke portion. It is fairly, I would almost say, frame by frame. Batman does look a little bit different. He kind of looks like a hybridization of the Brian Bolland artwork from the original graphic novel and the animated series, or at least animated equivalents of Batman we've seen previously. And the film reunites Kevin Conroy, Tara Strong, and Mark Hamill. You have Ray Wise as, Commissioner Gordon. And so the entirety of the Killing Joke portion of the story is, I have no complaints about at all whatsoever. Where my reservations entered the fray was watching the Batgirl segments at the start and at the finish. The entirety of it as a standalone story was actually pretty cool. You got to see Barbara kicking lots of ass. The only sort of, where the reservations begins is she's supposed to be this strong female character, and she's somewhat pining over not being able to get the attentions of Batman. For better or worse, this is the direction they chose to go with. She is a woman. She is attracted to this slightly older guy. We don't know exactly what the age difference is. There are some incarnations that have her being as young as, Dick Grayson and such like that. So it's like, was Batman a pedophile? No, well, she's obviously older than that. It almost reminds me of the original 60s Batman series, in that, you had an older Barbara Gordon, and there was kind of flirty tension there a little bit in the campy nature of the show. And I kind of feel like, this might have taken some of its inspiration from that. Definitely Barbara Gordon has her sights on Batman and wants to get through to him, wants to reach him, wants to be noticed by him. And there are aspects of the, being clad in the bat attire, going out kicking ass, that entices her and gets her sort of hot and bothered, heated, if you will. And this comes to a culmination, effectively, where we see Barbara and Batman getting it on a rooftop. And this is the chief sort of element that has gotten the most controversy, because then there's an estrangement that follows, and we very much have Barbara sort of waiting for Batman to call her. It's like, she's kind of pining over why isn't he calling me? What's going on? And there's even dialogue to the effect, that she's like, she finally breaks down and calls him, and she's like, well, come on, are we going to talk about it? Why don't we just forget about it? Forget it ever happened. And I mean, sort of 1980s sitcom flavor story aesthetics. And so it's easy to see why this has become so controversial, this adaptation with this added prologue, as I say, because, this kind of, you can kind of see where the argument comes in, that this is demeaning to who the character of Batgirl is, to the strength of her character. She shouldn't be pining over a guy, whether it's Batman or not. But, of course, Batman is the center of his universe. Batman is almost ubiquitous. And even for Barbara, she's not just looking up to him as an idol, as, someone who is inspiring her, that she wants to aspire toward. She wants the nookie, because of how hot and bothered she's gotten. So you have a scenario where it's just like, what have they done to Batgirl? Without even getting into what her age is meant to be. As I say, she is portrayed as older. She's a librarian. That's where a lot of that, sort of calling back, I think, hearkening back to the 60s series comes into the fray. And to see that there is romantic tension, to see that she's kind of, what I would say, because I understand where the controversial argument comes from, where the disdaining argument comes from in how this sort of demeans her character, I would also say, to those who feel that way, to those who have that reaction, how much of this relationship is being portrayed as realistically as possible? As far as sometimes people in the heat of the moment are not thinking with their best efforts, are not thinking with their best brain capacity, especially when their loins or their emotions or their feelings or their attractions are leading the way. And how many times have two people gotten together and realized maybe we shouldn't have done that? There are elements to their coming together, to Batgirl's and Batman's coming together, Barbara and Bruce, that could arguably be said to be a realistic dynamic in the human equation, in couples getting together and kind of regretting it after the fact and things not going as smoothly thereafter. The biggest sort of complaint, for lack of a better term, gripe, I guess you could say, that I would have putting forward my thoughts on the film and the prologue added to the original Killing Joke story, I don't personally have so deep a problem with Barbara being attracted to Batman and potentially getting with him and the fallout that occurs after that. Where my own reservations begin are the fact that the Killing Joke story does not really acknowledge this deepening of the relationship between Bruce and Batgirl. He should be out for blood, and he was in the original story, but it was, there was no sense of there having been a romantic link between Bruce and Barbara at that time in that original story. And I feel like there should have been a much more thorough escalation in his being out for blood, in his seeking the Joker, wanting to take the Clown Prince of Crime's very life for what he did to a girl, a woman he got with. I don't know. It's a strange situation. Batman seems largely sort of ambivalent when it comes to how Barbara feels about him. He seems ambivalent after they're getting together, and it just doesn't feel like there is any motivation on his part for their having gotten together. So it kind of undermines what purpose did that addition to the story serve if nothing else really changes or is affected by it. And so it's like I was really thoroughly through the roof with the rest of the story, the Killing Joke aspects of the story, and I liked sort of the Barbara prologue effect as a standalone thing. I just don't feel like there was much success in marrying the two, even though for those who are upset by the sort of weakening demeanor of the character with her being this pining girl lost in lust or love or interest in Batman that she is, there is that end cap, as I note, where effectively you see her, some time must have passed. She's on the phone with her father, returning home in a wheelchair. She's been playing wall ball to strengthen her upper body, and she has fully become the Oracle at this point. And it's kind of like, okay, well, we see that life goes on for her. She's a strong individual. The strength in her character has not diminished, in spite of what's happened to her in the story. But you could argue this was kind of their way of trying to throw a bone to the audience that would have felt it was despicable what they'd done in the prologue, having her get with Batman in the first place, having her pine over him, waiting for him to call her, and all these kinds of things. So it's one of those things where I wasn't personally heavily disappointed by it, but there are aspects of it that perplexed me. And it's only sort of my own, very much enjoying the Mark Hamill performance as the Joker, hearing Kevin Conroy back as Batman, Tara Strong back as Barbara, or an incarnation of her in any case, and all of that stuff. The adaptation of The Killing Joke itself put it over the roof for me as far as, enjoyment goes. I really enjoyed seeing it animated. I thought it looked really, really well done. But of course, I still will always have those reservations. Like, well, what were they thinking? I mean, of course, they wanted to be able to pad it out a little bit to lengthen the story, because we wouldn't have had much of a movie length feature kind of situation. It's almost a scenario where I kind of wish they would have done maybe a couple of different short story adaptations. The Killing Joke could have been one of them, and maybe you had a couple other ones to sit alongside it in a DVD release instead of having to pad it out and make it a longer individual story. I don't know. You know, I can see both sides of the argument. I could see sitting back and just kind of enjoying the animated feature for what it is, and for the majority, I did. I enjoyed it for what it was, but I can still see where the divisiveness and the aggravation comes in Batgirl fans, and you know, fans of female superheroes to begin with. And yet again, I would say, to argue devil's advocate, well, how many relationships have not evolved along those lines in the real world? More often than not, I think you'll find people getting together and parting ways. You know, it's sadly just the way we are as human beings, and to have this included in the story, I don't necessarily know that it diminishes the character of Barbara Gordon, Batgirl. I leave that for you, the tentative Batgirl fan, to decide. It's just one of those things. I mean, you know, the animation was crisp and clear. It was beautiful. It was translated fairly well from the original Killing Joke, you know, sort of artwork. And you just really, it's to each their own as far as whether or not you enjoyed the added aspects of the Batgirl prologue elements. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of The Killing Joke, DC animated feature by Bruce Timm, and co-directed by Bruce Timm and Sam Liu. And you know, not much more I can say on it other than that. You either love it or hate it, I guess, and that seems to be the modern aesthetic for most fans when it comes to superhero films and comics and things of that sort. So yeah, otherwise, I hope this video finds you well. That'll be pretty much it for me on this, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.